So in this session, we are going to discuss about collections, an important topic in Java, even in the perspective of interview as well. So collections. So what are collections? What is a collection? So collection is used to represent a group of objects into single entity. So to represent a group of objects into one single entity, we need to have a collection. So how can we define a collection is like it represents a group of objects. It represents group of objects into single entity. This is what we mean by collection. So group of objects can be anything. Like say for example, I define a class employee, right? And if I wanted to create bunch of objects of employee class, so to represent all those group of objects, employee objects, so we can create a collection. So in the same way, like if I wanted to group some strings, or if I wanted to group some objects, right? Objects could be anything, right? Employee, student, any object, right? So the user defined class, we define a class, and if you wanted to create multiple different objects regarding that class, right? So with respect to that class, then we can group all those similar objects or even non-similar objects into one single entity. So if we wanted to represent like that, then we need collections. So that's the definition of collection. Now, collection is an interface which is available in a package called java.util. So what is a collection? So collection, the keyword, right? So collection is an interface. This is itself is an interface. So there is an interface called collection in Java, which is available in a package called java.util. Java.util, right? Now let us see the hierarchy of collections. So this is the complete hierarchy of collections. So collection is an interface which extends iterable interface. Iterable is also an interface. So whatever are in blue here are representing the interface, and whatever are in green rectangles are representing the class here. All right, so iterable is an interface and collection is an interface which is extending iterable interface, right? And again, list, queue, and set are the interfaces extending collection interface. So list, queue, and set are the interfaces which are extending collection interface, right? And list has its own implementations, meaning so array list, linked list, vector. So all these three are like the classes. So green here represents, green rectangle represents classes. So this dotted line means that these classes are implementing this interface, right? So list is an interface and array list, linked list, vector are the classes which are implementing this list interface. Again, stack is another class which is extending vector class, right? And coming to queue. So queue is an interface, and you can see DQ is another interface which is extending queue, right? And you can see the hierarchy of all the other interfaces and classes as well, right? So set is another important interface, and you can see sorted set is is another interface which is extending it, and you can see hash set here. This is important. So hash set is implementing set interface. Linked hash set is also implementing set interface, right? So this is the overall collection hierarchy available in Java, but in Selenium, like we are not going to use all of them. So we are going to use only some of them, and we are going to learn only what we are going to use in Selenium, right? So here you can see, this is what we are going to discuss in this session, right? So collection is an interface, and you can see, right? List and set are the two interfaces which are extending this collection interface. And list is, implemented by a class called ArrayList. So we are going to discuss ArrayList today. And then we'll discuss about set. So HashSet. So what is HashSet? HashSet is another class which is implementing set interface, right? And then map is completely different, which doesn't come under the collections umbrella, but it's a different interface. But still, map is an interface, and HashMap is a class which is implementing map interface. So we are going to discuss today in this session what are our in green color here, right? ArrayList, HashSet, followed by HashMap. So let's start with ArrayList. Any questions? Is that clear? All right. So what is an ArrayList? ArrayList is a class which implements list interface. So we have seen that no, just now, right? So we are going to start with ArrayList. ArrayList is a class which is implementing list interface. And what are the characteristics of ArrayList? We'll see that now. So ArrayList is a class which is implementing list interface, right? So it can store heterogeneous data. So it can store heterogeneous data, meaning so data of non-similar type. So if I can have an array list, so array list is a collection, right? So is a class which is implementing list interface. So array list, if I declare an object of array list, right? So using that object, we can use the methods of array list, and using those methods, like we can store the heterogeneous data, meaning non-similar data. So I can have, say, for example, I have an array list of 5 objects. So I can have multiple data types stored in it. So data of multiple types can be stored in the array list. So that is allowed. Then coming to the insertion order. So insertion. So if you remember, array list so is also follows the array index. Like say for example, I have an array of 5 objects, right? So how we actually represent an array using the index, if you remember. So we represent using the index, right? So we do have, this is 0th index, 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? If we have an array, we do represent it with the index. So elements are stored in order, right? In order according to the index, right? So first element stores in first index, and the array index starts with 0, right? The same thing applies to array list as well. So array list also follows an order. So follows an insertion order. So if you wanted to access an element at the second position, you can easily get it using the index 1, right? And so on. If you wanted to get it an element at the position 4, so 4, then the index of 4 will be 3. 1 always 1 minus the actual position, because the index starts with 0, right? So say for example, I have some a here uh, and some string here. I can have some double value, some integer value, right? Like this. I can have Boolean value. Non-similar data type can also be stored in an array list, right? So array list preserves the order. So when it can preserve the order, when it has the index, when it follows the index, right? So there are like two types how actually the data is stored in memory, right? So say for example, this is memory. So index based is like if I wanted to store it, an array list. So array list is stored in a chunk of memory. Like, so a chunk of memory will be allocated, and so this part, right? So this is an array list. Say for example, it will be divided into index, and within the memory, it will be stored in sequence of memory locations. So this is about array list, right? And if what are all the hash set or hash map, right? So those are stored in a different algorithm. So these are the algorithms, right? So index based is one algorithm. So where a sequence of memory locations. So elements are stored in a sequence of memory locations, and are accessed using the indexes. And coming to the hash part, right? Hash part. So it is stored random. Say for example, one element can be stored here. There won't be it won't be stored in a sequence of memory locations. So when we use the hashing algorithm, so which is not based on index. So we'll see that when we are discussing about the hash set. But just for now, you should be thinking of like there are two types of algorithms how we can store the elements in memory. So first type is like index based. So in index based, a sequence of elements are stored in a sequence of memory locations. And using the hash algorithm, so there won't be such sequence. So it will be at a random order, but still there is something called hashing algorithm which will actually calculate some hash, and based on hash is something like an integer. So that integer will actually give you the actual memory location where the element has to be stored, right? So based on that it will be stored, and all those hashing integers will be stored according to a bucket within the hashing algorithm. Yeah, I'm not going in detail about how the implementation will be, but just think it of like if it is an array list, if any collection is an index based, so the elements are stored in sequence using the index. And if it is hash based algorithm, so it is stored in a random locations in the on the memory, but still they are connected using a something called hash, so which is calculated internally, right? So yeah, that's about how the elements are stored in memory with respect to index-based collection, right? And array list is an index-based collection. So insertion order is preserved. So whatever order we insert the elements, we can retrieve them in the same order. That's what we mean by insertion order. So array list preserves the insertion order. Next, coming to duplicate elements. So can I have like something like this? Say for example, I have 10 in array list. So can I have 20? And if I wanted to store the same element 10 again, so is this possible? Yes. Arrest actually allows the duplicate elements to be stored. So that's what this point means, right? And then multiple nulls. So we can store the null values as well. So we can store null value as one element in the array list, right? So not only one element, we can store multiple null values in an array list, right? So this is about the array list characteristics, some of the array list characteristics. Now let us see an example on that. So I'm going to create one array list example now. So for today, we'll create a new package called day20. I'll create a class. We call it as array list demo. First, we'll see how to declare an array list, right? So how to declare an array list. So there are like multiple ways. I'll show you. Array list. Array list is a class, right? So we need to create an object for it. New array list. So array list is coming from util package, java.util package. See, it automatically imported that java.util package because array list is a class which is defined in a package called java.util. All right. So if it is not imported, you have to import it hovering on this array list. Say for example, so you have to hover on this array list and then you need to choose this statement, import array list java.util from java.util package, right? So you need to do that. So we created an ArrayList object now. ArrayList is a class which is implementing list interface, and we created an object for ArrayList class now. All right. So we do have as list is an so ArrayList is a class which is implementing list interface. So if you remember while discussing the interfaces, we have seen this. So can I have something like this? So this is possible, right? So we can create an object. We can't create an object for interface. So list is an interface here, but we can create an object for a class which is implementing an interface. In this case, ArrayList. So I created an object for ArrayList using a keyword called new. New ArrayList creates an object in memory, and I wanted to store that as a reference variable. So I can store that in a reference variable of the corresponding interface, right? So this is possible. So this is one kind of declaration. So you can declare the array list like this as well, right? So it is asking to, this is throwing error. It wants to import this list. So list is a class, again, like which is, interface, which is present in java.util package. So you just need to import it. So this is other way of declaring it. So if you don't know like what data type your array list you are gonna store, so definitely array list is gonna use to store the objects. So no primitive data types. So we have discussed this even in the earlier sessions, why we need the wrapper classes as well, right? So array list is a collection. So the collections can never store directly the primitive data types. It can only store the objects. So array list is no exception to that, and it actually stores the data types of different data types as well. So it can store the different types of data as well. But if you wanted to store the similar data type, like if you wanted to store the group of objects which are of similar type, right? So in that case, there is other type of declaration. So array list. So it follows the same as this. But only thing is like we can specify the type here, what type I'm gonna store. Say for example, I'm gonna store all the strings in my array list. Then the declaration has to be like this. It will be like this. So we have to specify the object type just beside the array list class name. So in Angular basis, right? So array list string of like this. Say for example, I created a class called employee and I wanted to store in my array list group of employee objects, right? Then it is just something like this. You just replace string with employee. If it is student objects you wanted to store in an array list, then you just replace employee with student and so on, right? So there are all the different types of declarations. So let me take the first declaration. So array list. So array list is an object here, and which is actually holding the reference of the new object created, new object of array list created here, right? So these are all the possible declarations. Now, all right. Now I wanted to add data into my array list. How do we do that? Adding data. So array list is an object, right? So array list is an object dot add. So there's a method called add. So ArrayList is a class. So we created an object. So we created an object called ArrayList itself. But you can see it's a lowercase ArrayList, right? So variable starts with lowercase letter, right? So I have created an object as ArrayList, ArrayList dot add. So there is a method defined in ArrayList class called add, right? So add, you can see here ArrayList. So we need to pass any object here, right? So we can pass any object. Say for example, I'll take our example like A. I wanted to store some char variable. Like this, how many elements I can add? So array list. So if it is an array, we declare array size, right? At the beginning itself, during the declaration part, we'll mention the array size as well, if you remember, right? But array list is a resizable implementation. Resizable implementation of array. So you don't need to, it's dynamic. You don't need to specify the size before while declaration itself. So it grows on demand. So array list grows on demand. Say for example, I wanted to add some 5 elements today, right? I added, and later I wanted to add more elements. So then I don't need to change the size or declaration anywhere for the array list. it grows automatically, right? So that's a great feature of ArrayList, right? So, and now let's coming to this adding part, right? So I can add a char, a string. See, I can add an integer, and say for example, I wanted to add some float a double value like this, right? So we can add a number of objects. So I'm just adding like six objects, right? For now. So this array list is of, it has multiple values. And just so let me add some more values here. So I'll add let's make this as 10. So if you observe, I'm adding null values as well. And intentionally I'm adding duplicates as well. See, this is duplicate. 10 we are adding 2 times. And also I'm adding null values as objects to the array list. And also I'm adding multiple null values to the array list, right? So now let's see. So I wanted to print the size of this array list, first of all, right? So, and you can see here, right? So we are adding different kinds of values. Intentionally, we are doing this, right? So we wanted to check if array list can actually hold this type of data or not, right? So we wanted to check all these properties. Now we'll see. So first thing, like I wanted to print the array list. And even before that, let's actually find the size of array list. So how do we find the size of array list? Array list dot, there's a method called size. So which actually returns the size of the array list, right? And I wanted to print this on the console. This actually gives us the size of the array list. Yeah, you can see here. So the size of the array list is 9. Seems like there are 9 elements. Yeah, there are 9 elements. So it actually gives you the result as 9, right? The size of the array list. So this is how you get the size of the array list using the method called size, right? Now, how do we display the array list? I wanted to display array list on the console. How do we do that? Just you can say something like this, array list. That's all. It will actually display that array list. We'll just have some captions here. This is size, right? Size of the array list. And here we wanted to display. Display data of array list, right? Display data of array list. That's it. You just need to know the array list object. So just have it written here. That's it. It should actually display the array list object. See, display data of the array list. This is the data, right? And you have to observe here. It actually is following the insertion order. So as array list is based on index. See, whatever order we added the elements, so it is preserved, right? And also you have to observe all the null values are also accepted in the array list. And multiple null values we have stored, right? And also you can see 10 is duplicate here. But still 10 has been added 2 times, even though it is duplicate, right? So which means that, so it actually follows the insertion order. This is proved. Heterogeneous data is allowed. And also we are able to store the duplicate elements. 10 we have stored it intentionally 2 times. Multiple null values are also allowed, right? So this actually proved that all the characteristics of the array list we defined. All right. And we displayed it on the console. Just you need to use the object name here, right? And to find the size of the array list, we use the method size. Now, if I wanted to remove an element from array list, how do we do that? Again, symbol array list dot, there is a method called remove, and you have to pass the index to it. So you have to pass the index to it. So you can see int index. So pass the index to it. So say for example, in our array, right? So this is our array, right? So okay, let's actually get this output here. This is our array list, right? So let me clear this other part. And you can see this is our array list, right? Now, so A is at the 0th index, Java is at first index, like that, right? So this is at 0th index, 1, 2, and so on, right? So till 8, there are 9 elements, so it will be 8, right? So now I wanted to actually remove one object from my array list. So how do we remove? You have to specify, you have to know the index of that element. Say for example, I wanted to remove 10 here, or I wanted to remove this 10 here, which is at index 2. See, 1, 2, 3. It's a third position, but the index of it is 2. So how can I remove that? I just need to provide its index. We just need to mention the index of it. Remove dot ArrayList dot remove, and then we just need to specify the index of it. So I am specifying the index of it as 2. So in that case, what happens? It actually removes the element which is present at index 2. It removes the index 2, right? So here 2 is the, what is 2? 2 is the index. So after removing, let's print. After removing one element, what's the array list? We wanted to look at it. So you can see this is the array list, actual array list. And if you observe, we actually removed one element which is located at index 2. Index 2 is 10 here, right? So you can see that element has been removed. So once the element has been removed, so the following elements will be shifted one index to the left side, right? So you can see here, the index will be changed here for this now. For this 25.5, it will be 2 now, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on, right? So that's how we can remove one element from the array list. So if you wanted to remove a particular element, you need to know all that you need to know is the index of that element. So if you know the index of the element, you will just pass that as an argument to the remove method. And that's it. We just call the remove method and pass the index to it. So the element which is present at that particular index will be removed from the array list. Now I wanted to insert an element into the array list. So how do we do that? So what do we mean by insert? We already added, right? So we added the elements using a method called add, right? So we are able to add the element using a method called add. And we are able to remove it using a method called remove. Now what is insert? So there's a difference. So there's a difference between add and insert. So let me show you. Say for example, this was my array list, right? So adding it is always at the end. So array list actually follows the index, and how it actually preserves the index, right? So whenever we add the elements, it goes on add it at the end of it, like, right? So say for example, there are 9 elements in it, right? So say if you wanted to add an extra new element, right? So then it will be added to the end of the array list. Always by default, array list adds the elements at the end of the list, right? So it will add to the array list at the end of the list, right? So now insert, what does insert mean? I wanted to insert somewhere between the elements. So this is not the new array list, right? We have removed it. So 10 is not there here. So say for example, I wanted to add after Java, right? So let's say, for example, after A, I wanted to add it. So where it is, like index of first object is A, second object Java is 1, but I wanted to add it at the before Java, so it will be 1, right? So I wanted to add an object, new object at a particular index, not at the, so if I just do add, ArrayList is gonna add the element to the end of the list, but now I wanted to insert it at a particular index, particular location. So say for example, in between 0 and first index. So in that case, I have to provide the index number, right? So we are going to use the same method add, but which takes two parameters here. So say for example, I wanted to add dot add at the first index. I wanted to add Python, right? So this will add at the first index. It will add Python. So just before Java, we will have Python. So if you observe, add, we use the same method add, but we pass two parameters. What is this called? You remember, we are using same method, but we are passing two arguments here. Earlier, we used to pass one argument. So what is this called? So this is called method overloading. So add method has been overloaded here. So after insertion, what's the array list? Now you can see clearly, right? So this was the current array list, and you can see before Java, we wanted to add on one element. So we specified the index 1 to have that element stored at that particular location, right? So after insertion, you can see this element. Like this, we can provide any index, any valid index within the array list, and we can actually store the value at that, insert the value at that particular index, at that particular position, right? So this is how we can insert an element in the array list at a particular index, right? So next, we wanted to modify element in the array list. So modify. So what does modify? Modify represent. So as we have access to the indexes, right? So indices. So we wanted to actually set update a value at a particular location. So how can we do that? Say for example, I wanted to make this true to false, right? So which at what index it is present. First we have to know the current elements. So after removing, this is the output, right? So let me put it here. After removing, right? And the current array list is this. All right, now I wanted to modify my array list. So modify in the sense like I wanted to modify an element. So we do have the elements, but I don't wanted to insert the element at the end of the array list, which I can do it using add. If I wanted to remove an element, I can use remove method. And if I wanted to insert an element at a particular index, we can use add method by passing two parameters, specifying the index, particular index, and the value which has to be added, right? Now I wanted to do something different. So I wanted to modify the element in the array list. So how do we do that? Array list dot, there's a method called set. Now we wanted to modify the existing element. So we do have an element, but I wanted to change the value of that object, right? So how can we do that? Say for example, I wanted to change this true to false. So at what index it is? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Fourth index, that's true, but I wanted to change it as false. So this is how we can do it. After modifying, this is the array list. You can see here, after modifying, you can see true has become false. So for that also, you need to specify the index, right? We need to specify the index. index so that you can actually modify the element value. So you can modify the element present in the array list by specifying its index. So two parameters, index and the new value, right? So we need to use the method called set for that to change the value of the element. Or you can say replace, or you can say change, right? All are synonyms to modify. All right. Now I wanted to access specific element in the array list. Access specific element from array list. How do we do that? So array list, there is a method called get. Again, we need to pass the index to it. So we wanted to access the specific element from the array list, right? So we definitely need to specify the index. At what index you wanted to retrieve the element from. Say, for example, I wanted to access maybe this one, 200, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth index. I can just pass the index of it. And just print it on the console. Access specific element. So using get method, we can actually read or access the element which is stored at the particular location in the particular index in the array list, right? See, accessing specific element 200, right? So we wanted to access this 200. So we specified the index of it 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it was stored at the fifth index. So we just need to pass this 5 as a parameter to the get method so that it will actually access the element which is present at the index 5 in the array list. Right? So this is how we can actually access the specific element from the array list. Now, this is important. How do we read all the elements from we wanted to read all the elements from the array list. So we can do this in different ways. We'll see all the different ways now. Reading different elements, reading all the elements from array list. So first we'll see how we do it using the traditional for loop. For I'll take the index. I'll start the index with 0. Index less than. So my index less than ArrayList dot size. So I don't know the size, right? So I need to get it using the size. So we are using the index here. So for loop, I'm using the traditional for loop, initializing the value index with 0, and then my condition. Condition has to be index less than ArrayList dot size. So it should not be less than or equal to, right? So ArrayList starts with index 0, right? So it can't go till the size. So less than size minus 1, right? So it has to be less than size, right? If you wanted to have it equals to, then it will be size minus 1. Both are valid. Anything you can use. So starting from 0, so less than size, right? So this is the condition, and each time index has to be incremented by 1. All right. Now, what method we will use? We use the same method. Every time we get the index, right? So we'll just pass it to the get method. That's all. And we wanted to print it on the console. See, earlier we displayed the elements, but that is, we just displayed the array list as is, like, right? So it was like this. So it's a complete array list. We are not accessing one specific element, right? But in this case, like we wanted to read all the elements one by one, using the index, right? So for that, we definitely need a loop, right? So we use the traditional for loop for that, and we are trying to access each element using the index. We wanted to read all the elements using the index. Now you can see, this is the actual way how you read the elements from the array list, right? So the earlier ones, these ones are, we are just displaying the array list as is, like, right? So you are specifying the array list. So whatever elements are present in the array list, currently array list, so it will be displayed in square braces, each one separated by a comma. But I wanted to access it, each element, read each element specifically. So in that case, so we can do it in different ways. So the first way we are trying is using the traditional for loop. And we know each element can be accessed using its index. So this is the reason we have actually used a loop on the index values, right? And we'll use the same method get. So when we pass index to the get method, we can access the element at a particular index in the array list, right? So this is how you can read all the elements from the array list using the traditional for loop. Now, let me comment this out, and then we'll use for each loop. So if you remember what is for each loop, I have an array list. Okay, from this. So what is my data type? So from this, I wanted to read each element from the array list. So that's what the for each loop says, right? So from the complete object, we wanted to read one by one. So when we use for each loop, when we wanted to read all the elements, right? Then we actually use the enhanced for loop or for each loop. So this is also called as for each loop or enhanced. If you remember, this is also called as enhanced for loop. So I'm passing the object and wanted to read each element from this array list. And for that we need to know the data type of the element stored in array list. But if you observe, we don't have one similar data type stored in this array list. In our case, we stored different kinds of data in our array list. So in that case, what will be our data type? Object. So we'll get an object data type, right? So we don't know the what objects are present in the array list. So different data types, right? So we don't know each data type. So we can have a generic object called object class, and we are creating an object for that. So this can hold any data type. So this is the reason we declared this object as object, right? So O is an object of object class. If you remember, object class is a super class of all the classes. This we discussed. Now we can just display the element like this, right? Which actually displays all the elements from the array list. See, it displays all the elements from the array list. So this using the for each loop, which is also called as enhanced for loop. So array list, we specify array list. This is the syntax. If you remember, from the array list, I wanted to read each element. What is the data type of each element? If it was a string, only string, then we would have had it as string. If it is an employee object, student object, then we would have represented with that particular class name. But we do have the heterogeneous data, that is different kinds of data in our array list. So it can't, what data type we can specify? We have to specify some generic data type here. So we specified that as, object, because object is a superclass of all the objects, and object can hold any data type, right? So we declared it as object, and using that object, we displayed the data. So, and for that, we use the enhanced for loop, right? All right. So this is the second way of reading all the elements from the array list. Now we'll see the third one. This is important. So there is something called iterator. Using iterator also, we can actually iterate the elements. So how do you do that? ArrayList dot, there is a method called iterator. ArrayList dot iterator, right? So we need to use that method on the ArrayList first, right? And what is iterator returning? It is returning iterator object, right? So iterator, we have to hold this in iterator. let's say for example, this is iterator, or let's have it like this. You need to import it, right? Iterator is an interface. We have seen that here, right? Iterable, but you can see this is an iterator. Iterator is an interface, right? So for interface, we can have the reference variable. So we are having the reference variable. And what is iterator? Iterator is a method. Iterator is a method which we are using for the array list on top of array list object. So array list dot iterator, and then just to hold it, so it is returning iterator. So we are storing it in the reference variable of iterator interface. All right. So this will be the first step. Next, how do so our aim is to read all the elements from the array list, right? So this will be the first step, right? We are actually calling the iterator method on array list, and we are storing it in some reference variable called some reference variable of iterator. All right. Now see what will I'll be using the while loop here. While loop, what will be my condition? Iterator dot has next. There is a method called has next. So let's take an example here. Say I have an array list. Array list maintains the indexes like this, right? And it can have some values in it. Some values like this. All right. So how do we iterate it using iterator? So what we can do is the condition says that this condition it dot has next. What it says is it actually looks for the first. It starts with the first index. So has next it returns true if there is the next element, right? So here it is first element. Has next actually returns if the element is present or not. If the element is present, it will result. It will return true. So here the first element, is it present? At the first index. First index it is there, right? So it is A, or the first element at index 0 is A. But what here it considers it if there is any element exists. So it will just check for non-empty. So it is there, right? So it returns true. So it dot has next returns true. Then it dot next method actually gives the object, that particular object, right? Has next actually points to the index, the next value, next object in the array list. And if it is present, it will result, it is not empty, or if it is present, then it returns true. You can see returns true if the iteration has more elements, right? Then if, in other words, returns true if next would return an element rather than throwing an exception, right? So has next actually returns true if there are more elements in the array list, then it will actually return true. So it returns true in our case for the first time. Then using the iterator object, we actually use the another method called next. Next actually returns the element which is actually returns the next element in the iteration, right? So it actually returns the particular element at that specified index. But here we do not specify any index like in enhanced for loop. If you observe in enhanced for loop also, we did not use index, right? So we wanted to read all the elements. We just use the enhanced for loop for that. So we don't wanted to read some specific elements using the index. We wanted to read all the elements. This is the reason we have seen like how to do that using an enhanced for loop. In the same way, using iterator, if you wanted to read all the elements, then we need to have two conditions, three things you have to remember. So you have to call the iterator method on the array list and store it as a reference variable. And using that reference variable, you will need to check the condition as next. If there is the next element is what it will check. Then if it is present, then the next element or the element will be displayed using a method called next. Right? So you can see here the data. Right? The data here. has been displayed. This is using iterator, right? So you can even have it something like this. Display all elements, or you can just mention it as reading all elements using iterator, right? Yeah, this is reading all elements using iterator. So what did we do here? Iterator is an interface. So we are using its method on ArrayList, as ArrayList is implementing list interface, right? So you can see, and iterator is a method. So we use iterator method on it, and we are showing it as a reference variable, and using that we are using two methods. HashNext actually returns true if there are more elements in the array list, or if there is at least the next element, if it is there, it will actually return the true. So if it is true, it enters into the while loop and it will display the particular element, right? The current element using the method called next, right? So next it will go on like, right? So it will go to the next element then. Say for example, the next element. First it will print A, then it will go to the has next actually points to the next element in the array list Java. So it is there, right? So it will just return true. Then using id.next, it will fetch the actual element present in that index, right? Next, again goes to while loop, it dot has next. The next element is present, 100, yes. So it will just check that if the element is present or not, has next. If it is present, next method actually reads the content within it, right? And so on. So once it reaches the end, so has next method, once it prints the last element, then what it does, it will check for the next element. Has more elements, has next actually checks for the next element. It is not present, right? So it will return false. So then it will come out of the while loop. So this is how the iterator works. So we can use iterator to read all the elements from the array list. This is how we can use it. So two methods. Has next actually checks the condition if the if the element is present, right? Next is, you can remember, you wanted to display the element, then you can use the iterator dot next method to display the content. So we can read the elements from the array list, reading all the elements from the array list using different ways. In three ways we have seen it, right? Now, I wanted to check if my array list is empty or not. So how do I check? I wanted to check if array list is empty. Is it empty or does it have any elements? I wanted to check that. How do we check that? Check if array list, check if array list is empty. Again, there's a method called isEmpty. There's a method called isEmpty which returns true if the array list is empty. It returns false. It returns false if it has elements in it. So you can see it returns false in this case because array list has some elements in it. The current array list has some elements in it, so it returns false. Right? So this is fine. Now I wanted to remove, say for example, I wanted to remove elements from the array list. See, if I wanted to remove all the elements from the array list, there's a method called clear. So there's a method called clear. If you just call clear method on array list, it will clear all the elements. So meaning it will remove all the elements from the array list. So we have seen how to remove at a specific index, right? So how do we do that? We just need to pass the specific index to the remove method. It will remove the element from that particular index, right? So this we have learned. Now I wanted to remove elements, I wanted to remove elements at some particular indexes, like, right? So at particular index, you can specify the index, and if I wanted to clear all the elements, I can use just clear method. We'll see that in few minutes, right? So how to clear all the elements from the array. But my requirement now is to clear, to clear some particular indexes. Say, for example, I don't want from my array list, I don't want this 100 and as well as this, say, for example, this 90 and this 254, some particular indexes, right? specified indexes, I wanted to remove the elements, and I wanted to do it in one shot, right? So you might answer it like I can write 3 remove statements, right? So no, I wanted it to be done in one go. So if I do clear, all the elements will be removed. If I do remove, I have to use remove method 3 times. But I wanted to do it in one shot. So how can we do that? So now let's observe. So let's see here. Removing some elements from array list. So how do we actually remove some elements? So here there is no direct method from array list. So we'll do it using some workaround. So for that, what we do is we create another array list, which I'll call it as array list 2. So I'm having another array list, right? So another array list, which I'll call it as array list 2. And to this array list 2, we'll add the elements. So how do we add the elements? Say I wanted to remove 100. What's the latest? This one, right? So I wanted to remove this Python. Say for example, Python. I'll just add Python to it. And then array list dot add. There's 200 in it, right? So, or let's remove some other thing, right? Okay, let's remove 200 itself, fine, right? So we'll just remove 200. See, what did we do? We added an array list, new array list, and added the elements which we wanted to remove from the original list. Now, what we'll do is, we'll actually call the actual array list now. So do not get confused with this new list. So this we created just now. This is called as array list 2. This we are using as a temporary array list to remove some particular elements from the actual array list, right? So this is our original array list. Dot remove all. We'll call a method called remove all. Remove all, and then we'll pass the array list 2. So with this, what happens? Removal is a method which removes all the elements passed to it as an array list. So what is the array list passed? So it's a new array list where we had 2 elements called Python and 200. It has 2 elements, these 2 elements, right? So this array list, new array list, we are passing it to removal method. Removal method, you have to observe on which array list it has been called. It's called on our original array list. On our original array list called array list, we are using a method called removal, which actually accepts another array list to remove the elements. So we are passing a newly constructed array list to it as an argument. So it takes this as an argument. So this new array list, so it will have the elements Python and 200. So that will be removed from the original array list. So this is how it works, right? Now, after removing, I can say multiple elements. What is my array list? I wanted to display it. Why do we have errors? Okay, there's it's misspelled. Yeah, you can see after removing multiple elements, you can see. So what has been removed? So from this array list, Python has been removed. 200 also has been removed, right? So this is our new array list. So what did we do here? We wanted to remove elements, multiple elements from the array list, right? So for that, what did we do? We actually used a temporary array list. We created a new array list, which we wanted to use it for temporary purpose, right? So we added the elements which we wanted to remove to that array list, and we passed it as an argument to the removal method. So array list has a method called removal, which actually accepts another array list. So we just passed the new array list, which we wanted to remove some elements from, right? So this actually remove the elements which are present in the new array list. So you can see here, right? So from the original list, we actually call the remove all method and pass the newly constructed array list to it. So the elements has been removed from that actual array list, and we have seen that output as well, right? All right. Now we will see the removal method. So remove all elements, right? Not some elements. We wanted to remove all the elements now. We can just use a method called clear, which actually removes all the elements from the array list. Now, so once we remove all the methods, so I can use if my array list is empty, is array list empty. So what will this return, this statement return this time? I'm not printing array list, but I'm calling is empty method. So earlier when we use isEmpty method, what did print? It displays false, right? Because array list has elements. Now we are calling clear method. Clear method actually removes all the elements from the array list, right? So, and after clearing, we are calling isEmpty method. So it has to return true. See, it returns true because the array list is empty now. We cleared all the elements from we removed all the elements from the array list. So it is empty now. Array list dot is empty returns true because it is empty, right? So these are all the different methods and different ways and all about the array list. Is that clear? Is that clear? Okay. So let's jump on to the next topic. So next is HashSet. What is an HashSet? So HashSet is a class which implements set interface. HashSet is a class which implements set interface. So you can see here. So set is an interface, HashSet is a class which is implementing set interface, right? So now let's see the HashSet properties. Again, like, like array list, it can even show HashSet is also can store heterogeneous data. That is data of different kinds, different types. It can store and it can group it in one collection called HashSet, right? And when we're discussing about the memory, right, like how it can be stored, it can be stored using an hashing algorithm. So hashing is like a hash will be calculated using the data we pass it, and it will actually have an integer. Based on the integer, a memory location will be identified, and that at particular location we actually store the element, right? So that's how the hashing algorithm works at a high level, right? And HashSet can actually allow the heterogeneous data to be stored, meaning it can store different kinds of data in it. Then insertion order. So this is important. So you can even compare it while looking at the properties of the HashSet. You can compare it with the array list as well. So insertion order is not preserved. So why insertion order is not preserved here? Because HashSet actually is storing the elements at a different locations in memory, right? So it doesn't actually store it in one chunk of memory where index is maintained, right? So if it is stored in some particular chunk of memory in a sequence of memory locations, then you can have the index, right? But it is stored in random memory locations using the hashing algorithm. So we can't actually preserve the insertion order. Insertion order might not be preserved. So meaning whatever order you insert the elements, you might not get back the elements in the same order. So insertion order is not preserved. This is because index is not supported in HashSet. Next, coming to duplicate elements. So we were able to add the duplicate elements to an array list, right? So that is not allowed in a HashSet. So duplicate elements, we can't add it in the HashSet. Next, multiple nulls not allowed, but we can add one single null. So why is this? if you go back to the last point, so duplicate elements not allowed, right? So even it treats null as one element, and null can also be added one time, but duplicates are not allowed. Duplicate null values are not allowed. We can, so one single null value is allowed, so it treats it as any other element. So one null value is allowed, but multiple null values are not allowed in the HashSet, because duplicate elements are not allowed in the HashSet. So you can compare it clearly, right? So it looks almost like exact opposite to the ArrayList HashSet, right? So only common thing is both can store the heterogeneous data. Now let's see an example on HashSet. I'll create a class. I'll call it as HashSet demo. First, we'll see how to declare an asset. So asset is a class, right? So we can create an object for it and just import HashSet from java.util package, right? So this is one way, and it is implementing set interface, right? So what we can do, we can create an HashSet object, and then we can store it in a set interface variable. So set, we can just say my set. So this is also valid because HashSet is implementing set interface. So we can store HashSet object in the reference variable of set interface. So just import even set from java.util package, right? So this is other way of declaring the HashSet object. Now, if I wanted to have similar items, say for example, I have all strings, then I can actually use something like this, right? My HashSet, which actually stores strings. New HashSet of strings. So this is the declaration. Like if you know prior that has in your HashSet object, you are going to store only string objects, then you can actually declare HashSet like this. So you'll just mention the data type, right? So these are the different ways of declaring HashSet. Now I'll just comment this too, and we'll use this one. So first, let's see how to add elements. Adding elements into HashSet. How do we add elements into HashSet? It's like the common method, right? So HashSet dot add, say for example 10. We can add heterogeneous data, right? So I'll just do it like this. Or what we can do is we can just get this the same here, so that we can even compare it, right? So we can just replace ArrayList with HashSet. All right. So what did we do here? We created a HashSet object and we are adding some elements to the HashSet, right? Just for comparison, we just did whatever elements we added to the ArrayList. We wanted to add it to the HashSet and observe like what will be the output, right? So first, let's print the size of it. Or what we can do is we will directly print the HashSet, right? So just say display HashSet. I'm displaying HashSet. All right. So now let's observe. So if you see here, we added these elements, right? So if you see the order of retrieval, we added the elements to the HashSet. The order of retrieval is different. So you see null here, right? Null has been added somewhere at the end, right? So you see null at the beginning, A, Java, and then you can see 200 here. 10 went somewhere here. So the order of retrieval is not the same. So it is stored in a different memory location. So it doesn't preserve the order. So insertion order is not preserved. So you can see the randomness of the elements while retrieved, while the elements retrieved. One thing, right? So next, if you observe, we try to add the duplicate element. So the duplicate element here is 10. So if you see, 10 appears only one time in the HashSet. So even though you try to add it, so while adding, you'll not get the error because it's only done at the runtime, right? So you can add it. But while HashSet is taking it, right? So it will actually consider, it will know that it is a duplicate and it will just eliminate it, right? So the duplicate has been eliminated. And another thing, so null, if you observe, null also appears only one time. We try to add multiple times null, but it appears only once, right? So it clearly says that duplicate elements are not allowed in the HashSet. And if you go back, so these 2 points we have seen, duplicate elements not allowed. So 10 was, when we try to add 10 2 times, it appears only one time in the HashSet. And multiple null values also, we try to insert 2 nulls, but only we can see 1 null in the HashSet. And we can clearly see, we clearly saw that the insertion order was not preserved, right? So we inserted, we started with A, Java 10 like that, but we can see a different order here when we try to read the elements or try to access the asset, right? So, and we were able to actually add the heterogeneous data to the asset. All right, now taking this into consideration, we can't take this as is, but let's take it. So it can't be preserved, right? Right. So the order is not preserved. So now I wanted to display the size of the asset. Asset dot size. Size is the method. Again, methods will be similar, but the properties of the collections will be different. The asset size is 7, only 7 9 now. So even though I think we had 9 elements here, but it is the size of it is only 7 because it just eliminates the duplicate elements, right? So this is how you can calculate, you can know the size of asset. All right. Now we'll see how to remove the element. Removing element from asset. How do we remove? Asset dot, there's a method called remove. So how do you remove now? So in array list, we know we can pass the index. So say for example, this is my asset, right? If I want, if it was array list, then we can pass the index of it to remove a particular object. Now, how do we actually remove? We just need to pass the value. Directly, we can pass the value of it. Say for example, I wanted to remove this one, the double value, 25.5, right? So I wanted to remove this. So I can just pass the value to it. So we pass value, not index, right? Pass value, not index, because index is not even supported. You can't even pass, right? So index is not supported in asset. So we just need to pass the value, element itself to the asset. Remove method in asset, right? So I'll just say after removing element, what is the asset? See, after removing the element, we remove 25.5, right? So it has been removed. So all that you need to observe here is to the remove method, we didn't pass the index to it. So index is not supported in asset. So we just pass the value itself directly, what value we wanted to remove from the asset. So it actually successfully removed that element from the asset. All right, now we wanted to insert the element. What is insertion? We saw how to add the element. So adding the element is like it was adding, and anyway insertion order was not preserved. Now can we insert the element? I wanted to insert element. So inserting element in array list, how did we do? So add is different, insert is different. Adding in array list, so it was adding at the end of the array list always, right? And insert, when we can insert it in between the elements because index was preserved there, right? So we used to have index there in array list, and we can specify the index if you wanted to insert an element at a particular position, right? But can we insert element in HashSet? So this is not possible because HashSet doesn't have index, right? Index is not supported. Elements can be at a random order, can be stored in a memory location in a different memory location. So we can't have it retrieved using the indexes. So we can't actually choose the location where it has to be stored at a particular location because it doesn't support the index. Insert element is not possible as index is not supported. Next, can we access specific element at a specific position? Access specific element. So using get method, what did we do? Get, and we used to pass the index in ArrayList. So I'm just comparing it. So whatever we have done in the ArrayList, I'm trying to do it in the HashSet as well, and just for comparison, and also to know the functionality of HashSet, how it works, right? So insert is not possible as index is not supported. Can we access specific element? Even this is not possible for the same reason, because you can't actually access the specific element. So you don't know the index, right? So index is not supported, so you can't access the specific element. No, how can, but we can do it with a workaround. So we can't access specific element directly from the HashSet, but we do have a workaround. So this is not the actual, actual case, like how to show, how to retrieve it at a particular index, but you can just consider this as a workaround, right? So how do we access it at a particular index? Even though it doesn't have index, so we wanted to access it at a particular index. So how we can do it, right? So how we can do it is we can create an array list. I'll call this as like this, and then array list, and we'll pass my hash set to it. Just import array list from java.util package. Now what we do is, using this, what did we do? We just converted hash set into hash set to array list. So how did we convert? We just pass this HashSet object to the array list, right? So with that, it actually converts this our HashSet into array list. Now what we can do, as we have the array list, we can actually print it, right? So we can actually access it from the index. So once it is converted into array list will have the index. Array list will have the index, right? Array list dot get of, say for example, any index. Say for example, first index. We can have the value A. So at first index, so 0, 1, right? So at first index, we have A. So we were able to access it. So what did we do here? We wanted to access a specific element from the HashSet, but that is not possible as the index is not supported by HashSet. If index was supported, we would have used the get method and pass the index to actually access the particular element stored in that specific index. But as index is not supported in HashSet, we can actually access it or do it with a workaround. So what workaround we followed here? We actually converted our HashSet into array list itself, so that we have an array list now, right? So this is an array list. We have an array list, and using that array list, what did we do? We actually use the index for the on the get method to actually retrieve the element at that particular index. This can be only called as an workaround, but not the exact method. So still we should be saying accessing specific element in HashSet is not possible. This is just a workaround. In case if you wanted to read the element at the particular position, then this should be considered only as a workaround. I'll just mention it as only workaround here. Possible with the workarounds. All right. So now coming to reading all the elements, right? So again, reading all elements in different ways. Can we use traditional for loop? We can't, right? So traditional for loop actually works on the index, right? So index is not supported here in HashSet. So we can directly use the enhanced for loop HashSet, and it has different kinds of data. So we'll store it in an object type, and we'll just display O here. So this reads all the elements, right? Read all the elements from HashSet, right? So we just use the enhanced for loop, same as how we did it for ArrayList. HashSet, from the HashSet, we wanted to read each element. So each element is of different data type. So in order to hold any data type, we declared it as an object class object, right? So this is using enhanced for loop. So we didn't use the traditional for loop. So because there is a no index. So to use the traditional for loop, so we actually start with the index, initialize the index. We write the condition on the index. We increment the index, right? So, but there is no concept of index in HashSet. So we did not try it with the traditional for loop to read all the elements in the HashSet. So we use just the enhanced for loop or for each loop. And we can use iterator. So we use iterator in ArrayList, right? So the same thing can be used here as well. So HashSet dot iterator is a method which we need to call on it, and that has to be held by some object. Just import iterator interface from java.util package, right? No. We'll write in while loop, same as ArrayList, right? So what did we do? We did iterator dot has next. Has next is a method which actually returns true if if the element is present, if the next element is present, right? Then id dot next. Just display if it is present, then just display its value is what we are saying. If the element is present, if there is any more elements in the HashSet is what it returns, right? So HashSet dot iterator, we have created an we call that iterator method and actually had this result, right? So iterator method is returning iterator object. So we copied it into an iterator reference variable, and that we are using it to actually call the as next method. So as next method, it will just see if the elements are present in the hash set. So if the element is present, then it will return true. So it's in so it will just go one by one, right? So it seems like a for each loop, right? So for each loop, what it does, it actually reads one by one, right? One by one object in the hash set. In the same way, iterator also iterates from for each element. So for each element, it will check if it is there. If it is present, it will enter into the loop, and then iterator will actually display the content of that element. Same. This is like same as ArrayList, right? Now let me show you. See, you can see the elements displayed, right? All right. Now we have seen how to read all the elements using in two ways. So using traditional for loop, we can't use it as it uses index, but we are able to see two other ways using enhanced for loop and using iterator method. We are able to read all the elements, right? All right. Now we wanted to clear all the elements. So we wanted to clear all the elements. So how do we clear all the elements? Simple. We can use clear method. And you can check the size of it. Is empty. If hash set is empty. Is hash set empty? We cleared it, right? So after removing elements, so you can see is hash empty, hash set empty? Yes, true, because we are clearing, we are removing all the elements. We use clear method, which removes all the elements from the HashSet, and we are just verifying it using isEmpty method. IsEmpty method here will return true. So these are all the different operations you can perform using HashSet, right? So just to recap, HashSet also compared to ArrayList, like it can also store the heterogeneous data, but unlike ArrayList, it can't actually preserve the insertion order because the index is not supported in HashSet, and duplicate elements are not allowed. So even null can be allowed, but only single time. So these are the properties we have seen, and we have seen different operations we can perform on the HashSet, right? Different operations. Any questions? Is that clear? Is that clear? All right. Now let's jump on to the next topic. So HashMap. What is HashMap? HashMap is also a class which implements map interface. As we can see here. So map is an interface and HashMap is a class which is implementing map interface. So map actually works different. It's not like a ArrayList or HashSet. So map, when we say map, map is a key value pair. So data can be stored in the form of key values. So let me show you. So it is always like not one value, but it's always like a different. Like say for example, it's stored in a key value pair. Say for example, I wanted to store employee ID and employee name, right? So here I can say Smith, comma 101, right? Kevin. Okay, first we'll store employee ID, right? So say for example, it is something like this. So it's always key value pair, right? Like this. Only two values again. So first value is called key, second value is called its value. So it's called key, comma, value. So it's always key, comma, value. This is what map means, right? So a map is equal to key pair. Whenever we say a map object, it will not be one element like any other elements, right? Till now we have seen list, set, like that. Those are all like one element, one value. But when we say map, it's a combination of key value, right? It's a key value pair. So along we'll have both key and value, right? So you can store any data type in the key and any data type in the value as well. So this is what the high level understanding of map is. So a map can only store key value pair. Always a map stores a key value pair. So it's a combination, right? So an example can be seen here, right? So an employee ID and its corresponding name, right? It can be anything, right? A product ID, product name, like that, right? So anything. So you will have a key and a corresponding value. Key, a corresponding value. So whenever we say a map element or map object, then it will be both key and value. So it will be both key and value. Now let's see the properties. So HashMap is a class which is implementing map interface, and map interface. So it has, so whenever we say map, it's a key value pair. Just remember that. Now let's see the properties of HashMap. So you can see data can be stored in the form of key value pairs. Yeah, we learned it. So data is always stored in the form of key value pairs. All right. Now key is always unique. This is very important. But we can have duplicate values. So key is always unique. Unique in the sense it is distinct. It can't be repeated. So we can't have duplicate keys here. So if I have 101 stored in the map as one element, so one object, right? So 102 Kevin, 103 Robert in this example, right? So if I wanted to try to have another key with 101, so it will not allow it. So it will just override the value. Say for example, I have 101 Smith, right? So if I wanted to have same 101 key and store it some other name, say from Mike, right? So then Smith will be replaced with Mike. So at any point of time, we can have only one unique key, right? We can't have the duplicate keys, but we can have duplicate values. So values can be repeated. So the best example could be like username password. Say for example, I have some username password, right? So username password, we can have username will be unique, right? But password can be same, right? Password can be same. Your username and my username might be different, but we both can have the same password, right? So that's the best example, right? So for the key value, so key here is username, value here is password, right? So username should be unique. That has to actually identify the each person, right? So in username password, so username password can be considered as key value pair and a map object, and here username will be unique. So which means that a key is unique, right? Password can be repeated. It can have duplicate values because uh, two persons can have the same password, right? So the value can be repeated, but key is always distinct here. So the map is a key value pair where key is distinct, where key is unique, right? Key can't be duplicate, but value can be duplicate, right? But value we can have duplicate values. No, insertion order not preserved. So because again, like index is not followed with even in the map, there is no index concept, right? So insertion order is not preserved. So with this understanding, let's actually see an example on HashMap. So I'm creating a new class. I'll call it as HashMap demo. First, we'll see how to declare a HashMap. HashMap. So HashMap is a class, right? So we need to import it from java.util package. And this is how we can declare an object for HashMap. This is one way. And HashMap is actually implementing map interface. So we can actually store it in the map interface reference variable. Again, import map from java.util package. So these are the two different ways to declare the hash map. And also, like we can store the values in hash map in key value pair, right? So we need to specify the data type. Say, for example, I am storing some ID as the key, and some name as my value, right? So so whenever there is a map, so it's always a key value pair, right? So this is how you need to declare it. Declare the data type. So usually what we do, we declare a data type in an angular basis. We just place the data type in an angular basis. But here, as it's a key value pair, we just need to specify both key and value. So key comma value in angular basis. And we have to specify both the data types of key and value. Key here stores integer values, and my value is always a string is what we are specifying here. And how do we specify? How do we complete this declaration is new hash map of integer comma string. I'll just comment these two declarations. So all three declarations are valid, right? So we have to declare hash map according to our requirement. No, we should not say adding elements. We'll say adding pairs to the map, right? So what's the method? We used to use add method, right? So here the methods differ. So we use the method called put. So put, I wanted to store integer as my key and some string as my value, right? So I'll just have some names here, right? Like this, I'm going to add some values. All right. So say, for example, I'll say Tim Smith here, but here one or two, and then I'll add from John. right? So what did we do? We used a method called put for HashMap where we wanted to add the key value pairs. So first one is a key which we declared as an integer. Second one in the sense value here is a string. So we enclosed it in the double quotes clearly, right? Now we wanted to display it on the console. So we'll just say HashMap. Now see, when we try to display the HashMap, see how it displays. It always displays even it displays in the key value page. So 101 is the key, value is the Smith here, right? And so on. But if you observe here, so we added 5 elements total, but you see only 4 elements. This is because 102 has been repeated. So key has to be unique, right? So, but we tried to actually add another key, 102 again, right? So we tried to repeat the key. So what happened? If you observe, so 102 Kevin has been replaced with John. So it will, what happened? It got overridden. So it can't have the duplicate keys. So it just overridden the value. It thought that you wanted to modify the value for the key 102, right? So it just modified the value for the key 102. So you can see the updated value here, John. So which clearly says that duplicate keys are not allowed, right? And all the elements you can see, even Smith, the value we repeated, right? So the value can be repeated. So we can have duplicate values, but we can't have duplicate keys, right? All right. So this is how we add the page right now. I'll just put this here. And how do we get the size? How do we get the size of the hash map? We just need to use the size method. We can just say size of hash map. Size of hash map is 4, right? So you have key value pairs as 4. So both key and value together will be taken into consideration as one pair, right? So when we say size, so it's a pair size, right? So map is always a pair, key value pair, right? So when we say size, it's 4. When you say 4, it's like 4 key value pairs, right? That's what you need to know. And how do we remove? So now we have seen how to add a key value pair to a map, right? So we use put method. So now how do you remove a pair? It's simple. Just use the remove method. Remove method, and we have to pass the key here. So we don't have the index concept, but we do have key value pairs, right? So we always access the elements using the key here, as key is unique. So say for example, I wanted to remove one element, 102. Say for example, I wanted to remove an element 102. So 102 here is a key. 102 is the key here, right? So I wanted to remove 102. So when we say 102, both are like key value pairs, right? Both key and value will be removed. So we'll see that now. So after removing, so after removing one pair, what's the hash map? How does hash map look like? So if you see here, we just removed 102, right? So it just removes both. It doesn't mean like it removes only key, right? So without value, there is no key, right? Without key, there is no value. It's like a pair, always a pair in map, right? So when you wanted to access the key value pair in a map, we can access it using the key, right? So what did we do? Using that, what did we do? We just pass the key to the remove method so that both key value pair of 102 has been removed from the map, from the hash map, right? We can see the new map here, the updated map here. So let me put it here. This is how we can remove a pair from the hash map. Now, how to access a particular value? Access value of the key. So we have seen this, right? So you just need to do get of 103. So this is how you can actually access the value of the key. Just place it here. After removing this, and 103. So you can access the value using the key, right? Access value of the key by just passing the key to the get method. So get method, when you pass the key to it, it will return the value of the corresponding key, right? So this is how you can access the value of the key. Now, how do you get all the keys from the hash map? So get all pairs or all keys. Now you'll see hm dot key set. Key set actually gives you all the keys. Key set method actually gives you the all keys, right? So you can see if you wanted to only retrieve only keys, right? So then this is the method you need to use, key set. Key set is the method which actually retrieves only keys, right? Now, if you wanted to access only values, if you wanted to retrieve only values, then this is the method hm.values, hashmap.values. This actually return you the values. Right? Now, if I wanted to have the both key values, if I wanted to display, right? So what is the method? So we can use entry set. Entry set is a method which actually displays key value, all the keys and values in the hash map. So these are the different methods we can use to retrieve the key set for keys, values for values, to retrieve values for the hash map, and entry set is used to retrieve the both key value pairs in the hash map, right? All right. Now, how do we read the data for all the elements, right? Reading data one by one, right? So we wanted to, this is like complete entry set values like that, but we wanted to retrieve one by one. So for that we can use for each, using for each loop or enhanced for loop. So observe now, it is not like a straightforward hash map, right? So we need to get the key set first. What does key set return? We have seen here, it returns keys, right? Using the keys, we can fetch the values, right? So each key is one integer, right? So I'm putting it into integer data type, right? So k here represents integer. Now, what I can do, this is key is k, right? Or let's say, for example, this is key. For each key, I wanted the value. So how do we get the value? I'll just leave some space here and then hm dot get of, pass the key here. That's it. So key set actually returns the keys, right? And we know get method, when we pass key to the get method, it will actually return the corresponding value of that key, right? You have seen that here. This actually returns Tanya for us, right? Now what we wanted to do, we wanted to use the for each loop, and we wanted to actually access all the key value pairs on the map, right? So for that, what did we do? We know key set actually returns keys, all the keys. And we also know using each key, when we pass it to the get method, it will return the value. So that is what we did here. See, we can see the key value pairs here. So this is how you can use the for each loop or enhanced for loop to display to access all the pairs in the map. Now we'll see how to use the iterator to retrieve all the elements, right? Using iterator. So iterator, what we do, the first step, what we do is we create hm dot. We usually create iterator on the object, right? But we have to do it on the entry set now. So you can see entry set is, so this is some special kind of collection, right? So it is not an element, it's a key value pair, right? So it's an object of key value pair. So we have to say entry set dot iterator, because we wanted to retrieve both key and value, right? So entry set, what it gives both key and value, right? So we have to iterate it on the entry set. You have to iterate it on the entry set. So first, when you say entry set, see what does it return? It returns an set, right? So if you see dot, this we can store it as an entry of integer comma string. We'll come to this. What does this mean? And then on top of entry set, we'll use the iterator. We'll have an iterator object. So let's import this first. Entry. Entry is also an interface, right? So what does this mean? hm.entrySet. So we usually apply iterator method on top of the respective object, right? But now as map is an key value pair. So, and I wanted to have the, so as it is a key value pair, how do I get the both key value pair? Using the entry set method. So we use entry set, and on top of that, we use the iterator method, right? And to capture this entry set, so we need each entry has to be captured, right? Entry is key value pair. Here in this case, integer comma string. So for that, we had this entry. And as we use iterator method, it returns iterator reference. So we use the iterator. So simple. As entry set method we use to store this entry. So we had this entry here, right? And we used on top of it, we use iterator method. So as like any other object, iterator will return like iterator. We have seen this in the ArrayList and HashSet as well. So we are storing it in the iterator reference variable. No, this part, while loop part will be the same. Like we'll call the hash hash next method, right? Hash next method, and then we'll display the values. But how do we display the value? It dot next is what we'll call. Fine. But what it will return? It dot next. It will return this entry, right? So this entry it is gonna return. So we need to capture that into one variable, one object of entry, and then using that entry. So this entry is a entry set, right? So entry set will have both key and value. So to get the key, we use the get key method, and the same entry we can use to get the value as well. So it will be a bit tricky. It's not like HashMap is not like any other interfaces, right? So in other collections, right? So it because it is key value pair, so it will be a bit tricky. So you just need to understand it. It's so with the entry set we get the entry. Entry is key value pair. Here in this case, entry is integer comma string, right? So iterate we can so it dot next actually returns the entry set next entry. So as it is returning next entry, so we need to capture it into some entry, some key value pair. So here we use entry interface. So it actually stored in the entry object now. So entry is a key value pair. So how do we using this entry? We are actually returning both key and value. For that, there are two methods. Get key actually returns key, get value returns value. Now you can see the values, right? So using the iterator, this is how we can actually retrieve the key value pair of the hash map. And clearing, right? So removing all pairs. This will be same, removing all pairs. hm dot clear removes all the pairs from the map. Now we can see is hash map empty. Is empty. Yes, it will be empty, right? So it will not have any key value pairs as we cleared all the pairs from the hash map. So these are the methods, different methods in the hash map. Is that clear? So this is how we need to use the hash map. So very important, even in the interview perspective, right? So we will use this hash map also while doing the automation, while writing the automation scripts, right? So we have to learn all these collections, at least these three, right? Whatever we discussed in this session, right? So is that clear, first of all? All right. So yeah. So just to recap, so we started with collections, right? And we just discussed three collections mainly, which we are gonna use in the coming sessions, right? So ArrayList, HashSet, and HashMap. So each have its own characteristics and properties. So we have seen example on each of this. So you have to go through this. So practice it more and more, then you'll get familiar with these methods and properties of these collections. So if you have any questions, you can ask, or else we can wrap up the session. So with this, we completed this collections, right? So what are collections we are gonna use while writing the automation scripts that we have discussed. So if you have any questions, you can ask. You can put it on the chat box. I'm stopping here.